I think what this film does very well is it just tells you a human story from many different perspectives.
Honestly, thank you all for the time. I'm speaking, of course, with director Poh Si Teng and stars of American Doctor, Thayer Ahmad and Feroze Sidwa, the subjects, the stars in question. American Doctor is an absolutely stunning, stunning film. Just as I'm watching this, I cannot help but have my heart broken time and time again, but in the best of ways. Uh, where did the film come from? How did it begin?
It began out of deep despair, if I can be really honest with you, a year into the genocide, and it just felt like people were still, at least in the US, whispering, Palestine, as though they couldn't be clearer in their, like they were skirting around language. They couldn't say what was going on, and they couldn't look at themselves in the mirror and recognize that their own taxpayer money was being done to a people. And so it came from a deep frustration. And I will say, like, I was a journalist long before I became a documentary filmmaker. And I had worked as a documentary commissioner for Al Jazeera English. And so a year in, seeing colleagues that I respected being targeted and executed, um, it did something to me. And I just felt I just couldn't continue my job as is. At that time, I had already another job. I was an executive, studio executive. And so it began this, whatever it is, I was trying to offer something that I felt like, I need to do something. But what I didn't know just yet. But I knew whatever I wanted to do, which is to make a film, to quit my job, and I had to start searching for this film that I wanted to make. And I'm an experienced producer. I've had almost 2 decades in experience, but this would be my directorial debut. So I was a little nervous. But fortunately, I chanced upon Dr. Mark Perlmutter. And so, I remember seeing him. This was sometime in the fall of 2024. A reporter asked him on video, like, why do you think, Dr. Perlmutter, you just came back from Gaza. Why do you think there's no ceasefire? And to which he responds, without skipping a beat, he says, there's no ceasefire because politicians are expletive to lobby groups. Now, if you watch the film, you know Mark doesn't mince words. And so soon after, and I introduced myself to Mark. Mark, I'm so and so. I'd love to make a film about you. Can we speak? We spoke. He introduces me to Dr. Thayer Ahmad and Dr. Feroze Sidwa. And that's when I thought, wow. You're as a filmmaker, I mean, as a producer, I know this. You're very lucky if you get to chance upon somebody who is so charismatic that you want to be in their world and you want to learn from them. You're extremely, extremely lucky if you get to meet three. And that is a privilege. And I did not want to waste that. And so that was the beginning of American Doctor.
Well, I mean, this is just such a powerful piece, and like having seen it, I got a chance to see it at the press screening, and seeing you, Feroz, and there, and Mark on the ground in Palestine, um, just working to save lives, not only to the threat of your own life, but for the sake of others, is an incredibly powerful thing. For the two of you stepping stepping onto the ground for the first time, seeing the situation, what was going through your mind?
Well, I have been to Gaza before October 7th many times over the last 15 years, and it was totally unrecognizable. Everything from what you were seeing, what you were smelling, where you were going, how many people you were seeing in the streets and in tents. So it was really, really tough to gather your composure and be able to function. And then on top of that, quite frankly, the proximity to the bombing, the proximity to the tanks that were rolling in, the shelling, the exchange of gunfire. It was not something that I had seen before, having worked in other parts of the world where there was conflict going on. And so it was a total shock. And so I do have to say, for me, I think if it wasn't for my Palestinian healthcare worker colleagues just being able to essentially hold my hand, I really doubt that I would be able to function or be able to be somewhat productive. I think I would have been an additional burden on them because it is so high intensity and the volume is so insane. And we're talking about really devastating and complicated injuries. And so all of that was really, really hard to adjust to, even having essentially a career in global health and response.
Yeah, for me, like there, I've worked in a lot of places around the world, but something I've never seen before is a hospital that had become a displaced persons camp.
Mm.
And when I got to European hospital, we were told by the administration that there were 10 to 15,000 people sheltering on the grounds of the hospital, so the hospital's campus, but also inside the hospital, lining the hospital's hallways with their own tents that families were living in. And even that was deplorable conditions, let alone outside, in the rainy season of Gaza's pretty wet in the winter. The whole place would be covered in mud. There's about 10,000 people sharing four toilets. There's hardly any running water. And I actually just, out of curiosity, I tried to drink the water one day and it was just violently horrible. Um, and then this hospital, it's about a 250 bed hospital. It had 1,500 people admitted to it, like actual patients. So it's at 7 times its bed capacity. That's just outrageous. I mean, that doesn't that's not a thing that's happening anywhere else in the world. So even just those two pretty small things were shocking, and like Thayer said, would have been just completely disorienting and disabling if it wasn't for the support of our colleagues there who said, like, take a breath, get to work.
Well, okay, forgive me for how this question might sound, but because the film is called American Doctor, I wondered for you both, being American coming in there, was there tension with the people who have been there all this time, or do they just welcome you in and say, finally, more hands?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, they are quite welcoming people. They're very clear that there are American teams coming in, British teams coming in, European teams, all countries of which are participating in what's taking place in Gaza and in Palestine. I mean, they're fueling the jets, they're giving the spare parts. If they're from Europe, if it's the United States, we're essentially administering this violence against them alongside the Israelis, and so they're Palestinians are really proficient in international politics and foreign policy, and they're also nuanced in understanding that these are individuals who are objecting to what's taking place and are insisting on standing in solidarity with them. And so it was a fraternity. They were welcoming their brothers and sisters in medicine and in health when they received us. And Feroze can expand on this, but it got to the point where if we, as we were leaving they were apologizing to us for not being able to properly host us.
Mhm.
That's just in the culture, the generosity of the Palestinian culture and hosting your guests and making sure your guest has no needs and wants for nothing. That was huge, and it weighed on them that they were not able to host us in their homes and cook us dinner. And I know Feroz can expand on this.
Yeah, there was a med student named Abdul Rahman Al-Najjar. He was 23. He was killed last year, but he was 23 when he died. But um, when I left Gaza, I remember he said, "Don't remember Gaza like this. This isn't Gaza. When you come, we'll rebuild Gaza, and then you come back, and we'll go have tea on the beach together, and that'll be how you remember Gaza. You'll never see it again that way." But yeah, just to emphasize what Thayer said, almost to the person, um, I apologize to everybody whose family, if I pronounced their family members dead, or even if I operated on somebody, and even if they lived, and I just wanted to say, I would tell them, I'm an American, and I'm very, very sorry. I know my government is doing this to you. Almost universally, they would ask me to stop apologizing. Then they would say, no, no, it's not you, it's your government that's doing this. Now, I think that's a false dichotomy in a democratic country. But the Palestinians are very familiar with what it is to have no control over your life, and they were very well aware that obviously I didn't show up in this place to be a doctor because I want it to be destroyed. It's quite the opposite. So no, that I have never encountered anything even remotely approaching an anti-American sentiment in the Palestinian territory, which to me is kind of shocking, actually.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And Poe, as you sat on the ground with these two guys, two gentlemen, what how did it affect you? How does this experience change you, having been on the ground with them and seeing them in action?
I'm really glad you asked me that question, Steve, because I wasn't in the ground. That was never going to happen for me. Mark, the eternal optimist, Dr. Mark Perlmutter, he in the early days of filming, he said to me, "I'm gonna train you as a scrub nurse. I'm gonna take you into Gaza." I'm like, Mark, that's never gonna happen. Anybody that does a cursory search of my name, and we know who controls the borders, they do a cursory search of my name, what are they gonna find? In the past, my work, past experience, New York Times journalist, Al Jazeera English documentary commissioner, ABC News Studios executive for Disney. Like that, are they gonna let me in? So I knew like early on that was not gonna happen. So we would have to work with a Gazan team, a Gazan cinematographer. Unfortunately, because I worked at Al Jazeera English, I worked with Reem Haddad, who's a producer on American Doctor, and she was also a documentary commissioner. And back in 2023, towards the end of the year, she had worked with this incredible cinematographer, Ibrahim Al-Otla, and who's our DP, and then the co-producer Mohammed Sawaf. And I saw their work, and I'm like, this is incredible verite work. Reem, can we work with this team? And so we reached out to Ibrahim and Mohammed. And so everything that you see from Gaza, it is a testament to both their craft and their courage. And this entire film, it's we are the sum of our parts, and our team spans 8 different countries. No one person, no one country could have pulled this. It took all of us, but it definitely took the sacrifices of our Gazan colleagues.
That's amazing. Absolutely incredible. Because this footage is unreal. Like,
It is
I'm
unreal.
sorry, it is real, but I mean, it's shockingly unreal. It feels like it's like, oh my goodness, sorry.
I mean, and I know exactly, Steve. And like we work with like two of the best editors. One of our editors, Emma Ryan Yamazaki. She was nominated for 2 Oscars like last year, right? Black Box Diaries. And I remember she was the first editor on the project. And when we got Ibrahim's footage, she said to me, "Who is your cinematographer? Everything can be used. Nothing. You don't need to cut anything." I said, "Yeah, it's just one person." And I don't think I've ever really mentioned this. Ibrahim does not speak English.
Hmm.
That means he is able to read body language. He knows when to lean in, when to move back. He knows, okay, Mark is gonna be emotional in this scene. He knows when to turn. He knows. So we are communicating with him and through Reem, and this person is on his own. And sometimes Mohammed Sawaf, the co-producer, would be there with him. And I will tell you one more thing. When we were filming in Gaza, this was March 2025, there was already a blockade in place. What does that mean? There was not food going in. That means they were already starving, along with their families. Both Ibrahim and Mohammed have 5 children each. Their youngest is very same, almost the same age as mine, and actually has the same name. Ibrahim's daughter and my daughter have the same name, Naveen. So, it just whatever, again, I say this again, like it's really their courage and their craft. They're so good at what they do. And I have worked with so many cinematographers in my past 2 decades in my career, in filmmaking, and never have I worked with someone like this. And so whatever they gave us, we want to honor that, and we want to make sure the message of our film, American Doctor, that we made with them goes out far and wide.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of the message far and wide, I'd love to talk to you both about the struggles with connecting and getting that messages out. We see, Feroze, you're doing interviews with CNN, and worried that you're actually going to be heard, or different. Forget who it was, the news station you're where you're actually discussing whether or not the interview will ever air. Um, can you talk about the challenge of getting the message out of the realities that you're facing?
The challenge is that the U.S. usually when the United States attacks somebody, the American media goes along with it, and the to be frank, Canadian media isn't much better, but when the U.S. attacks somebody, the American media goes along with it, and that means that the people being attacked are not people, they're unpeople. They're not deserving of having their story told, of having their dignity maintained, of recognizing their loss, what it means to drop bombs on these people. It's very different from when an official enemy attacks somebody. And so being unable to really get this message out in the media to the degree that it should have, with the seriousness that it should have, with the right focus, with the right emphasis that it should have had. That's what this kind of movie can cut through. This kind of film can show people what they really should have seen on their screens from, because you saw some of it on social media. The Palestinian, there are hundreds of Palestinian journalists in the Gaza Strip, and a lot of them are dead. And a lot of them have really done some incredible work, not just on social media, but also for Al Jazeera, for the Associated Press, for Reuters, for plenty of our outlets. But they've been picked off one by one by one by one. Um, and the social media space has been tightened up very aggressively over the past year. So this kind of film can cut through all that, because it's a film and it kind of stands on its own. And people like you see it and they're like, I think they're pretty affected by it. So it's kind of hard to contain it and stop it at that point.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the comments that's made within this film that I think is very interesting, and forgive me, I can't remember whether it's you, Feroze, you there, or Mark, says, "I'm not pro anything. I'm a human being." Because I think one of these things with an issue as certainly as important as this is the assumption is you have to pick a side to be involved in help. But it's very clear in a film like this that there's a quest for humanity over politics. Can you talk about that challenge or even the expectation people put on you for having some political ideas that maybe you're just focusing on the tragedy?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that came in a moment of frustration, especially because the way that voices can be dismissed, people can be censored, dehumanization can really play a role in a lot of what we see in the media and even in film is this idea that you can make things very dichotomous, you can make it very polarizing, and you could say it's this side versus this side. And I think the what really we wanted to bring home as physicians who volunteered, and I think what this film does very well is it just tells you a human story from many different perspectives, including the perspectives of people who are on the ground living under this and you pretty quickly will shed a lot of those biases just by looking at them tell stories about their family members that they lost, or by you seeing them say goodbye to their friends or hug, or when Feroz gets a hug from Khalid as he's leaving Nasser Hospital. And I think that I was just so frustrated in that moment because it's not a serious sort of allegation against any of us that, oh, this person is anti this or this person is pro that. It's just a way to derail the conversation. It's a way to distract. It's a way to continue the status quo. And I think for me, when you know the cost of that distraction, it really frustrates you and it really upsets you. And so I think that's, part of what why I'm, really hopeful about this film and the power of film, and hopefully that we can get it in front of audiences is because it's that's not the question that will come up from most audiences or from most people that we talk to, like you, Steve. It's not going to be, you have this bias, or you're pro this. Why are you this way? Or doesn't that mean that you're discredited or that you shouldn't have an opinion on the matter? And instead, we're talking to people who are affected about this, who see the families, who see where the homes once stood, who look at the coastline of the Gaza Strip and understand the havoc that has been wreaked on those people. And those are the conversations I want to be a part of. And so I'm really, that's what I'm hopeful. That's really what gives me hope when we are going to different cities and we're able to talk to folks after these screenings.
Yeah, I think this movie shows people certain things that simply cannot be justified. It's very hard to justify the mass shooting of children or complete destruction of a society. And I think it prompts people to just say, what is going on here? What is my involvement in this? And I hope it prompts them to be horrified by their involvement and to act on it.
Yeah, one thing that it was kind of born out of frustration, living in the US, it's like, why are some people confused? One, why are some people turning away? Two, and I was like, well, how can we bring what's happening there, in which what we're, as taxpayers, American taxpayers, we're responsible for, how do we bring it back to the United States? And so in my last job, I was an executive for a studio. And when you're an executive for a studio, you have to make commercial episodic series and films. And so we always watch how people watch, why people watch.
Mm.
And it was not lost on me that medical dramas do very well. Every year you have two or three on streaming platforms. I'm a big fan of The Pit. I was a big fan of ER. I am a big fan of House MD and Grey's Anatomy back in the day, even Scrubs. So I thought maybe this is the way. We're going to make The Pit. Difference is it's going to be real. It's going to be set in Gaza. And this is how we're going to bring back what's happening in Gaza and in Palestine back into the American and Western psyche.
Well, as I said, it is a remarkable piece. It demands a response, it demands a connection, and it demands conversation and attention. Honestly, I am so grateful for the chance to chat with you all about American Doctor. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank you
Steve.
for
Appreciate
having
you.
us.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Absolutely. Have a wonderful day.